سارة، صار عندي حادث سيارة واتصلت بالمحامي كاجي.
قصدين أنتي المحامي كاج؟
يعني هذا المكتب اللي قالوا عليه أكبر مكتب محاماة عربي كلداني بأمريكا، كاجي؟
لا أنا محامي بالكاجي لا. أنا أعرف لورنس، هو قال لي كاجي لا.
أنا أعرف العائلة زين، يقولوها قاجي.
بعد أي حادث سيارة اتصلوا بي، أنا محامي لورنس قاجي. 248-702-6641 248-702-6641.
أعزائي المستمعين، مساء الخير عليكم وأهلا وسهلا بكم في برنامج المحامي لورنس قاجي. معي في الاستوديو اليوم المحامي جان شرودر. نقول welcome Mr. John.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for having me back.
You are always wonderful.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
معنا طبعا الأخت العزيزة الباراليغال الست مارا. أهلا وسهلا.
أهلا وسهلا للجميع.
اليوم المحامي لورنس عنده محكمة فما موجود. Today he have court. He's not with us. طبعا تكلمنا الأسبوع الماضي عن موضوع شلون أنت بالنسبة لك إذا عندك كيس ناجح شلون أنت تسويه أفضل. هذا كان الحديث مالنا مع المحامي لورنس والمحامي جان. واليوم ارتأى المحامي جان أنه مو نعيد لكنه نضيف أشياء جديدة على هذا الموضوع لأنه ما قدرنا في الأسبوع الماضي أن نكمله. هذا سؤالنا.
Welcome everybody. Attorney Lawrence is today out, not with us. It's just Attorney John and me and Mr. Sahar. We are going to continue talking about how we make a successful case.
Yes, indeed.
We are going to add more information and more tips on how to get it even better.
Yep, that's absolutely right. As we talked about last time,
yes.
There are a lot of good cases out there. The trick is always making a good case better because
right.
Just being in an accident, even if it's a severe accident, sometimes isn't quite enough. We talked about a lot of things. I'll just very briefly recap. But if you didn't catch the show last time, we're talking about motor vehicle accidents and specifically motor vehicle accident cases.
قبل ما ترجم الأخت تمارا، أي واحد عنده سؤال استفسار يقدر يتصل بنا على الهواء على 586-825-2015 586-825-2015. ونذكركم دائما برقم تليفون المحامي لورنس اللي هو 248-702-6641.
نكمل احنا حديثنا. يجوز المستمع الجديدين مو من ذاك الاسبوع. نريد نذكركم بانه احنا الحديث مالتنا عن حوادث السيارات وشون نسوي القضية احسن. مرات الحادث كلش كبير بس القضية ركيكة، فشون اكو نقاط مهمة شون نسوي الحادث احسن. أهم نقطة يعجبني الكل تعرفها، ماكو حادثين أو شخصين عندهم نفس القضية. لو واحد قاعد بصف اللاخ وبنفس الحادث صاروا، كل واحد عنده قضية شكل،
كل واحد قضيته تفرق.
بالضبط، وكل واحد حتى التسوية مالتها تكون غير شكل،
تفرق
كلش هواية.
So, and I want to start out today by kind of saying something we've said a few times, which is if any of the listeners have questions,
yes,
please call us. That could be about old cases. That could be about new cases. That could be about friends' cases. It could be about families' cases. It could be even hypothetical cases. Just, hey, what if this happened to me? What should I do? We're more than happy to take those calls. We are here to answer.
Yes.
Any questions that anybody has. So please call us.
مثل ما تفضل الأستاذ ساهر بأنه والمحامي اللي عنده أي سؤال أو أي استفسار أو عنده أي قصة يريد يعني يتحدث يذكرها ويانا، يتصل بينا على المكتب، على يتصل بينا على الإذاعة اليوم 586-825-2015. واللي ما يقدر هسه يخابر ويحب يتصل بينا على المكتب it is 248-702-6641.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was about to say, if you have a very personal matter that you don't want to do over the radio, that's absolutely fine as well. We do free private consultations.
She say it before you.
I know.
I think she know what
well,
you
I have to translate from Arabic to English now.
I know. Yeah.
Well, I can read his mind.
That's right.
She can read your
mind. She knows. She knows.
That's great.
When you've been working with someone for what, about 6 years? More than 6 years.
More than 6 years.
Then she's gotten to know me over the last few years, I'd say. But anyway, so again, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, issues that you want to ask, please call
us.
Anyway, so where we left off last time, we were talking about a few different ways that you can make your case a lot better. I would just want to reiterate those. We talked about, in particular, filing a police report right away, right? Preferably within 24 hours. And part of that is because of a provision in certain contracts that you can elect called an uninsured motorist provision. Just as a very brief reminder, an uninsured motorist provision means that if someone hits you, they're at fault, but then they don't have insurance or you're unable to identify any insurance that they have, you can still get compensated for pain and suffering if you purchase uninsured motorist provision. But most uninsured motorist provisions require that you file a police report within 24 hours.
That's the main thing.
Yeah.
أول شيء بنحب نذكر بأنه وراء الحادث جدا جدا مهم خلال 24 ساعة تسوي بالضبط مال الشرطة، تقرير شرطة. إذا الشرطة جتي بعد أحسن، إذا الشرطة ما جتي رأسا أنتم تروحون للمركز الشرطة وتخبروهم. ليش؟ لأنه أكو فقرة إذا أنت ما كنت غلطان بالحادث واللي ضربك ما عنده انشورنس أو ضربك وانهزم أو ما عرفنا منه هو، اكو فقره بالانشورنس مال الشخص نفسه بانه اذا احد ضربك انت عندك تغطيه للعطل وضرر، وهاي تتطلب بانه اكو تقرير شرطه خلال 24 ساعه، واذا ماكو خلال 24 ساعه هاي الفقره تخسرها، وهي هناك المصاريف الكبيره اللي تجي من عندها للشخص، هو يعني هذا حقه للعطل وضرر.
سؤالي للمحامي.
Yes, you have a question.
I have a question. سؤالي للمحامي شو يقول؟ إذا واحد هو مصاب تأذى وما قدر يروح لمركز الشرطة، ما قدر يسوي التقرير، هو راح للمستشفى ودوه إسعاف، شلون؟
He said if somebody got really hurt in the accident and an EMS came and took him immediately, he couldn't go to the police station. What should you do?
Fantastic question. I love that question. So I've actually encountered that on multiple occasions. There are a couple things. First of all, if the police arrive at the scene, okay, then they will generally make a report anyway. It's not a bad idea to follow up when you have a chance, but if police come to the scene, then they're going to make a report. So you're covered. Now, if for whatever reason the police never made it to the scene, and this especially happens when the police are very busy, an EMS comes, picks somebody up, the police never make it to the scene for whatever reason.
This is my question.
Yeah. So what you do is at your first available opportunity, you make that report. If you have a good excuse as to why you were unable to make a report within 24 hours, I think that most courts are going to look at that and excuse the contractual requirement. There's a contractual, essentially doctrine of impossibility. Okay. And that is if there is a portion of a contract that is impossible to perform, then generally speaking, someone can be excused from that contractual requirement. And a good example of this is, let's say you are taken immediately to the hospital after a severe accident. You are in a coma Okay, and I'm going to use this more extreme
Yes,
example here.
Let's say it, yeah.
But just to use the most extreme example that I think would probably pass muster, you're in a coma for 48 hours. Well, you can't file a police report in those 48 hours because you're not conscious. Right. You are not even conscious. Okay. And then I think it's fair to say that if you're not released from that hospital for another week after that, and then you go file a police report, I think most courts would excuse the contractual requirement of getting that police report filed within 24 hours.
You said most.
Well,
some they will not.
So I think that in most cases that they will. The reason I say most is because I cannot predict what any individual judge is going to do on any individual case, and the facts and circumstances can always change. I'm going to let her translate.
سؤال أستاذ ساهر كان إذا الشخص تضرر من وراء الحادث ورأسا أخذته الإسعاف للمستشفى وما قدر يسوي التقرير مال الشرطة. أولا تصير وصايرة هواية. ثانيا مدام أخذتك الإسعاف هذا كافي بأنه أكو تقرير بأنه أنت كنت جوي أخذوك من مكان حادث بالضبط.
يعني أكو حادث
بالضبط. ومرات الشرطة تتأخر لأي سبب أو لآخر ويعرفون مثلا لأنه هم كلهم على نفس يعني الخط والاتصالات مالتهم مرات يروحون الشرطة هم للمستشفى لأقصى الحالات حتى خلينا نقول بأنه الشخص في غيبوبة وماكو شرطة. أكثر الحكام راح يخلون التقرير المستشفى حتى لو يسوون ورا أسبوع له 10 أيام التقرير الشرطة راح يعطوه إعفاء لأنه أكو تقرير يعني طبي ويعني لأنه أول شيء أنت حياتك هاي أول شيء. وإحنا ليش نقول الأكثر ما نقول الكل؟ لأن إحنا ما نعرف الحكام كل حاكم يقدر يسوي اللي يريده عنده طريقته الخاصة بالضبط. واحد يقدر يسويها ورا ما يطلع من المستشفى وعنده تقارير طبية.
Yeah. Now I want to distinguish though, because your question is a good one, between impossibility and just it being inconvenient. Because if a person tries to go file a police report and for whatever reason the police say, oh, I'm too busy, come back later, and then the person never goes and tries again, that's not going to cut it, right? That's not going to work.
Happens sometimes.
It absolutely. You'd be shocked how often this happens. The police are supposed to take a report right away. But I have heard reports, it hasn't happened necessarily to me personally, but I have heard reports from many clients that they've tried to go in to make a report. And for whatever reason, the police say, we can't take it for you right now. Come back tomorrow, which they're not supposed to do.
Yes,
but nevertheless, it happens. And so, I think that you as a victim have to be persistent a little bit. And you have to say, look, I've got to make this report. It's important. And you've got to, if you got to go back an hour later or 2 hours later and try a different person.
Can you force them?
You can, but it's one of those things that isn't necessarily going to be easy to do. So you as an individual, what power do you have to force someone to do things? Well, you can force someone to do things through the courts.
Even our people, when they go there, it's scary for them.
Right. I mean, as an individual, most people aren't in a position to force a police station to do something right then and there, right? So, I mean,
only if you have a position, big position.
And I mean, I don't know that the position makes a lot of difference. I think it really just.
As a lawyer.
I think it depends a lot more on whether or not the police station is properly staffed and trained more than anything else. I mean, unfortunately, these days, sometimes there are staffing shortages and they just don't have the manpower to react to everything. I don't want to put it all on the police like, everything they do is bad or wrong. I mean, they've got tough jobs too.
Yeah.
So, it is what it is. Anyway, but my point is this. If you wait too long, you could be barred. And so it's important to get it filed right away. And I'll give you 2 specific case examples that were argued in my legal professional history, that where one worked out and one didn't. Okay?
Let her translate the first one. previous one.
I love it because he's looking after me.
That's
Yeah,
nice.
because
That's
I
good.
have to because I don't want you to,
Absolutely.
because he can go like
like a machine.
I could go for a while.
yeah,
It's true.
yeah, the whole show.
Yeah,
So النقطة الأخرى، إذا مثلا صح أنت تضررت من الحادث ورحت للمركز الشرطة، مركز الشرطة يعني همنا هي يعني دائرة، وأكثر الدوائر يعني مع الأسف شوية ما عندهم الستاف الكامل أو يعني عمال الكامل. يقول لك مثلا ارجع ثاني يوم، لو تعال لي بعد يومين. الشخص اللي متضرر بالحادث لازم هو يكون المسؤول. صح هو راح، بس هاي ما راح تفيده، لازم يرجع ويظل يروح. واكيد هم من يشوفوه مرتين راح يسوون اللي لازم يصير. فهي ما لها علاقه بانه انت عندك منصب ولا ماكو منصب. لو تعرف احد هنا يجوز، اذا تعرف احد احتمال تفرق شويه، بس دا احاول اصير يعني بالنص فير. والمحامي جاء راح ينطينا مثالين بنفس الشيء اللي صار، ومرة نجحت ومرة ما نجحت.
Yeah.
Your example.
So the two cases that I'm thinking of, there was one case where the insurance company refused to pay on the policy provision based upon the fact that a person filed the police report 36 hours after an accident. There was a motion for summary disposition filed, meaning the defendant asked the court to dismiss all the claims related to that uninsured motorist claim, okay, because they didn't file the police report in 24 hours as required, and they waited to 36 hours. In the other case that I want to mention, a person did not try at all for the first 6 months. Then he went to the police, and the police refused to take the report because they didn't have sufficient evidence, or so they told him, and so he reported to us. And so he ultimately never got a police report filed. I think you can probably guess which case worked out better and which one didn't.
100%.
But I'll tell you anyway. The court allowed the person who filed the police report within 36 hours to proceed. And that person also had a good excuse, and that was he was in the hospital. He went straight from the scene to the hospital. The police did not file a report on his behalf. But the next day when he got out of the hospital, he went and he filed a report. Now, it wasn't within 24 hours because it took him a day to get out of the hospital. Yeah. Okay. But the court decided that was fine to proceed and that he did what was needed under the contract. In the 6 months case, the court decided that was not sufficient, okay, to meet the policy requirements.
القضيتين هي بأنه أكو قضية الشخص راح وراء 36 ساعة للشرطة، الانشورنس المقابلة حاولت ويا المحكمة بأنه تسقط القضية لأنه ما سواها خلال 24 ساعة. القضية الثانية أنه 6 أشهر فاتت على الحادث وراد يروح يسوي الريبورت، الشرطة ما قبلت لأنه يعني كلش الوقت طويل. القصة الأولى بالضبط، القصة الأولى الحاكم أعطاه بأنه القضية تمشي لأنه الشخص كان بالمستشفى، ومن طلع من المستشفى يلا راح سوى الحاكم يعني خلاها القضية تمشي ما سقطها. بينما القضية الثانية 6 أشهر سقطها لأنه كان وقت جدا طويل، كان عنده مجال جدا كثير بأنه يروح يسوي تقرير.
ليش ما سواه؟
بالضبط.
Yeah. So long and short of it, file the police report as soon as you can, right? Yeah. One last thing I'll just mention on this topic, even if you don't believe you're injured, it's often a good idea to file the police report, because first of all, most people that end up with soft tissue injury or basically anything less than a broken bone, there is adrenaline that's going on when you first are in an accident, right? And you're
Yeah.
worried about your car, you're worried about getting to work, you're
You
worried
don't worry
about
about your health at that time. Sometimes.
yeah, and there's a little bit of shock and adrenaline going, and you may not even realize that you're injured. So it's a good idea to get that police report filed within 24 hours anyway, because it may be a day or 2 or 3 days later that you feel it. But more than that, I mean, you may also have a damage claim for your vehicle, right? You may need to show an insurance company a couple of years down the road that you weren't at fault, or whatever the case may be. It's really not a bad idea as a matter of course just to go in and file a police report. If the police aren't there, go file one. It doesn't hurt you.
في بعض الأحيان ما عدا الجروح والكسور بالبداية أول ما يصير الحادث جسم الإنسان الأدرينالين الأنزيمات اللي بالجسم تصير عالية بحيث الجسم يصير مثل الخدران، ما تحس بأي وجع. حتى لو أنت ما تحس بوجع ودايخ بالسيارة وتعرف منه لو روح سوي تقرير الشرطة، لأن ما تدري ورا يوم يومين ورا أسبوع إيش راح يصير بيك. الأعراض تبدي تطلع ورا فد يوم،
خصوصا الظهر.
بالضبط. الظهر والرقبة.
نعم.
كلش يعني بعد أيام تبين بالضبط. بينما حتى لسيارتك إذا تريد تصلحها همينة تقرير الشرطة جدا مهم. هواية هنا مع الأسف الجالية مالتنا خاصة يقول قال لي هاي تليفوني وهذا مالتي الإجازة أخذها وخابرني واني أصلح لك إياها وما عليك. بعدين تخابر وماكو والصير وهالنوبة لاكو تقرير شرطة ولا لك ماكو عندك أي أحد ولا كل شيء. أهم شيء تروح تسوي تقرير شرطة ضد أو مع، تريد تستعمله أو ما تستعمله. أهم شيء عندك واحد، ما تعرف باكر عقبه شيء يصير.
نعم. خلينا نحكي في قصة صغيرة مثلا يعني حتى بالنسبة
أوكي. عندك
إذا واحد مثلا ضربته سيارة، يعني انضربت سيارته ومثل شنو مثل ما انت ذكرتي قبل شويه،
صحيح،
اجى قال له هاك اجازتي هاك انا بالنسبه لي خابرني ما اعرف شلون، يعني هالاشياء تصير هاي نوبات
طبعا.
ف يعني نصيحه من عنده المحامي انه مهما كانت انت لازم تسوي ريبورت، لانه بعدين انت يصير الصوت عليك يجوز.
صحيح
تمام.
صحيح. For example, you got rear-ended and you came down and the other guy said, oh, here's my phone number, here's my insurance information or whatever.
Sure.
And then and we will handle it. What is your advice for the listeners that what to do?
Yeah, so it depends. The first thing is make sure you're feeling safe in the location, right? Because I would say that there are certain situations where you just don't feel comfortable staying in the spot that you're at. If you've got the person's information and you really feel like you need to get out of there, so be it, right? But I do think that if you can get the police to the scene and have them record all the information, they will make sure to get all the information they need on a police report, which can be used later. You may not always be able to get all the information you need from the other driver. So I think, I'd prefer that someone, get the police involved. But with that said, I mean, if you've got enough information, if you can get a license plate, you can get their insurance information, you get their name, their picture of their license and all that. That's second best, and I can use that, right? As an attorney, we've used that many times. So if you're just, not able to stick around and wait for the police for whatever reason, but you've got their information and the plate and all that, hallelujah, that's fine.
But you have to go to the police station and make a police report.
But at the end of the day, right, then you'll have to.
That's what I said.
Right, but that's the thing is you will then be able to go to the police station, right? And if you show them these pictures, they'll probably take the report. But if you don't have all the information, again, this is where you sometimes get people that have pushback from the police saying, oh, well, we don't have all the information we need. So again, I would prefer that you just call the police.
يعني مهما كان لازم تخاف.
That's the short answer.
بالضبط، مهما كان اتصل بالشرطة. طبعا مثل ما نقول أولا بأنه أنت لازم يكون المكان اللي صار به الحادث تحس روحك بأنه أنت مو بخطر، مكان مو مريح له، وتاخذ المعلومات وتمشي وتتخاف، سويها وامشي، بس روح أنت للشرطة. إذا تقدر لا اتصل بالشرطة وخلي الشرطة تجي. إذا وقفك أحد وقال له خلنا ناخذ بس الأرقام، أخذ رقم التليفون، أخذ صورة من مالته الإجازة، وأخذ صورة من مالته الإنشورنس. بالضبط، هاي الثلاث أشياء كفاية بأنه أنت تقدر تروح لمركز الشرطة وتسوي التقرير الشرطة أنت. وإذا عندك صورة مال سيارة بعد أحسن طبعا، بس حسب الوضعية اللي أنت بيها. بس خصم الكلام مثل ما نقول
نتيجة.
الأهم شيء بأنه أنت تسوي تقرير شرطة
لازم.
فقط.
Now, we spent a lot of time on talking about police reports. We also talked last time about getting a police report amended if it's inaccurate. I don't want to spend too much more time on this because we talked about it now 2 sessions in a row. I want to move on a little bit. We also talked about last time pictures, videos worth 1,000 words, super important. I don't want to dwell on that again today because, again, we talked about it last time. But it is super important. Get your attorney all the pictures and videos you can get, which means you got to take them at the scene if you can. If you have injuries, take those pictures of any injuries, scars especially, things like that. But then I want to move into treatment next.
مثل ما تفضل اكو همينه تصير هوايه اخطاء بالتقارير الشرطه. لذلك احنا نحب نقول للمستمعين بانه روح خلال اسبوع طلع تقرير الشرطه، طلعه يعني اخذه من عندهم يمك، اقراه او خلي احد يقرا لك اياه او خلي محامي يقرا لك اياه.
هذه بعد انت تسوي ريبورت
بالضبط،
بعدين تروح
تاخذه.
نعم.
لانه مرات اكو اشياء خطا وتقدر لانه الفتره قصيره تقدر تعدل الخطا.
نعم.
اذا يفوت فتره ما يسووها لانهم ما يتذكرون بعد وتبقى الخطا بالتقرير الشرطه. وما نريد نطول لانه احنا اوريدي حكينا ذاك الاسبوع.
خصم الحكي مثل ما يقولون
خصم الكلام
العفو. لازم نروح الى محامي.
بالضبط،
هذا اهم شيء.
هاي اهم شيء.
احنا بالنسبه لنا يعني وي بريفير مكتب المحامي لورنس قاجي اللي هو 248 702 6641.
والاستجارة مجانية كذلك. مثل ما قلنا اللي يقدر ياخذ صور أو فيديوهات مو بس للسيارة بس الأجزاء الجسم المتضررة همينة تفيدنا. فهسه راح نخش بموضوع آخر، راح نخش بموضوع بأنه شنو العلاجات اللي لازم نسويها على مود نحسن القضية،
نسويها أفضل. هي تنجح لكن نريدها
أفضل.
Yes.
Okay, so again, we're talking about motor vehicle accidents, right? We're talking about someone who was just injured in a motor vehicle accident. And we did briefly last time mention that if you're injured, you should go to the hospital. 100%. However, there's more than just the hospital, right? The hospital is the very start and not at all the end.
أول ما تصير عندك حادث سيارة تروح أول شيء للمستشفى. هاي لازم حتى لما تعرف إذا أكو يعني نزيف داخلي أو شيء، واحد من هاي الأشياء اللي يخاف اللي ما تبين. بس العلاج ما يتوقف لهنا.
Right. So again, when we're talking about motor vehicle accidents, there are 2 kinds of claims. There's a first party claim, which will generally cover your medical, but there's also a third party or bodily injury claim, which you can assert against an at-fault driver, okay, for your pain and suffering. And that you generally, the money will come from their insurance that they're required to maintain on their policy.
من تتعرض الحادث هي مو بس العلاج، بس أنت لك حق عطل ضرر. العطل ضرر بأنه أنت تضررت وتعطلت من وراء حادث، وهذا يكون ضد اللي ضربك، يطلع من الانشورنس ضد اللي ضربك. بالضبط.
Now, because your own insurance policy will cover your medical in most cases, okay, or you've got a specific opt-out because you've got health insurance that covers auto accidents, generally speaking, your medical treatment is going to be covered. So you shouldn't worry about going to the doctor to get medical treatment. I just had an intake today who asked me, he said, I didn't go to the hospital after the accident because I was worried about getting the bill because my health insurance doesn't cover auto accidents. And I looked at his auto policy, and of course, he has medical coverage. He had an unlimited personal injury protection policy for his medical. So he can and could have gone to the hospital right away, right after that accident, and gotten treatment. So it's important that in almost every case, you are going to be covered for your medical bills that are related to an accident one way or the other.
النقطة الأولى، هواية ناس تقول أنا ما أروح للمستشفى لأن مالتي الانشورنس ما تغطي حوادث سيارات مع المستشفى. أهم شيء الصحة. تغطي أو ما تغطي لازم تروح. احنا موجودين وتشوف لك محامي واحنا نعرف شلون نسوي لك اياها. مثال جدا بسيط، هسه قبل ما نجي كان عندنا حادث جديد، يعني زبون جديد، وهمينا سألنا، رحت للمستشفى قال لا لأنه مالتي الانشورنس ما يغطي، فما رحت شفنا مالته الباليسي مالته unlimited مفتوحة العلاجات، يقدر يروح يسوي، لأن هذا ما له علاقة. العلاج من تتعالج قد ما تتعالج هذا الانشورنس مالتك يدفعها. اوكي، العطل وضرر الانشورنس ضد اللي ضربك يدفعها. هذا المبلغ يجيك إلك. المبلغ مال الطبابة تروح للأطباء. فإذا أنت تصرف $1 ولا 250,000 هاي مو إلك. هاي هواية ناس يقول أنا ما أروح لأنه دا يأخذون من الانشورنس مالتي. انت دافعه اوريدي، فخلي ياخذوه. انت دا تصرف عليه كل شهر حتى عندك انشورنس تغطي، فتروح تتعالج حتى القضيه ضد اللي ضربك تكون احسن.
Yeah. And frankly, with respect to these, I mean, I don't mind if people have questions about this. You can call the office. I can look at a declarations page, and in less than a minute, in most cases, I can tell you exactly what your coverages are. So you can call into our office. I mean, you can call into the radio right now.
لأنه استشارة مجانية، يعني تقدر أنت بالنسبة لك إذا تخابرنا طبعا اعتيادي أثناء البرنامج، لكن حتى إذا خابرت أنت المكتب اللي هو 248-702-6641، إذا خابرتهم أيضا راح يقوموا لك بالواجب ويجاوبوك على كل أسئلتك أنت. يعني فلهذا
اللي بالضبط اللي خابر بين 9 و5 يحصل جواب مباشرة. اللي خابر قبل 9 لو ورا 5 الجواب يجي دائما ثاني يوم. بالضبط، حتى بس يعني للمعلومة، لأنه يعني إحنا موجودين مرات المحامي لورنس رأسا يكتب لهم ويقول لهم شنو اللي يصير. وإحنا موجودين. يس. ومثل ما قلنا الاستشارة مجانية ما تخسر. قالت مثل ما قال هسه المحامي جان، قال بس أشوفها للباليسي مالتكم خلال أقل من دقيقة أقدر أقول لك شنو مالتك التغطية. بالضبط. Exactly.
It's very quick. It's really not. It does not. I mean, I've done it 1,000 times. Yes. So anyway, my point in saying all that is I don't want people to be afraid that their medical bills aren't going to be covered, and that's the reason why they don't get medical treatment. The only reason you shouldn't get medical treatment after an accident is if you're not injured. If you feel you are not injured at all, great. Then that's fine. And you don't need to come to me. That's great. But if you are injured, don't be afraid to go get treatment.
إذا الضربة خفيفة جدا، شخطة صغيرة بالسيارة، أنت بس فزيت ما صار بيك شيء، يعني ماكو داعي. تقدر بس تروح تسوي تقرير شرطة حتى بس تروح تصلح سيارتك وانتهى الموضوع. بالضبط، ماكو داعي يعني تسوي أي شيء. إنه الحمد لله بأنه أنت صحته ما بيها شيء وتقدر تستمر بكل شيء.
Yeah. But so let's say we've got a person, they're injured. Okay, they know they've got medical coverage. That's great. They've gone to the hospital. They've been checked out. You know, hospitals will often run x-rays, and I think most people know what x-rays are, you know, those black and white. Everybody's seen those black and white images of the bones, and, you know, if there's a fracture, then the doctor will circle a little spot and say, there's your fracture. But let's say,
scare me.
well, I mean, fractures do happen in accidents all the time. And going to the hospital, getting those x-rays done is great. And it's a first step. But again, as I said, that's not the end of the equation. The question is, well, what do you do after a hospital? Okay. And some people know exactly what they want to do, and some people don't. And that's usually where we come in.
طبعا مثل ما قلنا تروح للمستشفى يسوي لك الأشعة. الأشعة تبين بس إذا أكو كسور أو لا. هاي أهم شيء، كسور ولو احتمالها منع إذا عندك أي نزيف داخلي. هاي أهم شيء بأنه أنت يعني ما عندك أشياء خطرة. هاي وحدة. اثنين، أكو وراها، هي مو بس المستشفى، وراها أكو ناس تعرف شو تريد تسوي ورا المستشفى، وأكو ناس ما تعرف شو تسوي ورا المستشفى. فإحنا نكون موجودين ويتصلون بينا وإحنا نقدر نساعدهم همينا.
Yeah. So a hospital may send someone to their primary care physician, or they may refer them to a pain management physician, or perhaps they'll send them to a physical medicine and rehabilitation physician, or whatever the person might get sent to. And all those are fine. But again, it's important to actually follow through with them. And part of the reason for that, there are two reasons. One is because you won't get better, generally speaking. Most people won't fully recover unless you get some kind of treatment, okay? And two, from a legal perspective, right? I'm not a doctor, I'm a lawyer. And from a legal perspective, you will not have a bodily injury case unless you can meet what's called the threshold injury requirement in Michigan, okay? And I'm going to explain what that is.
ورمت بالمستشفى مرات هم يدزوك إلى، لو يقولوا لك تروح لازم تشوف طبيبك العام، لو تروح تشوف طبيب الأوجاع الآلام، لو يودوك إلى طبيب المفاصل أو إلى أي طبيب. هنا تجي بأنه جدا مهمة بأنه أنت تكمل العلاج وراء المستشفى، جدا مهم، لأنه القانون بميشيغان حتى تسوي قضية ضد اللي غلطان، ضد اللي ضربك، لازم توصل إلى أكو حد معين لازم توصله من الضرر، يلا تقدر تسوي هاي القضية.
Yeah. So, the threshold injury requirement in Michigan basically says the following. You have to have what is called, and I'm going to give you the legal terminology, but I'm going to explain it. You have to have what's called an objective manifestation of an injury to an important body function, which affects your ability to lead a normal life. For most people, that's what we're looking for. Okay. And what does that really boil down to? Well, it means an important body part was injured in an accident. Okay. And that it's affecting their ability to lead a normal life. So again, maybe you can't do the cooking, the cleaning, the dishwashing that you used to do. Maybe you can't go to work. Maybe you just can't, you go to your local football or basketball rec league, whatever it might be. And that's actually the last two elements. But the first element, the objective manifestation portion, that means that there has to be something objectively perceivable by someone other than the injured person. So for example, a doctor can see it on a diagnostic test.
اللي قاله المحامي جان بالضبط راح ابسطه لانه الحكاه حكاه شويه بسرعه وبشويه يعني تفاصيل. لازم انت تكون متضرر لجزء مهم بالجسم، واللي هو الجسم كله مهم
طبعا
بالضبط، وبي صاير ضرر. اوكي، يعني متأذي. هذا شلون اول او اخر اثنين، بانه انت تعرف بانه انت صار عندك حادث سياره وانت موجوع ومتضرر. هاي أول واحد بأنه أنت شلون راح تثبت بأنه أنت متضرر بالتقارير الطبية وبالتحاليل الطبية اللي الأطباء اللي راح تروح لهم وراح يسووا لك التحاليل المطلوبة وراح يكتبون التقارير، وهاي التقارير نقدمها للإنشورنس حتى تبين بأنه أنت متضرر.
Right. So to meet that objective requirement, there are many ways, and I could go into all those ways, but that would take me about a week. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to focus on the most common ways that you can prove it. And the number one common way is a diagnostic test. Okay. And again, we just talked about x-rays. X-rays are a great diagnostic test, but you know, from a non-doctor perspective, from a legal perspective, what do I see x-rays showing me over and over and over again? They show me fractures, but what do they not show me? They don't show me anything else. So x-rays aren't going to do it for actually the majority of accident cases, because just because you're in an accident, just because you're in pain doesn't immediately mean you have a fracture. You could have thousands of other different diagnoses, right? You could have disc herniations in your back. You could have a torn ligament in any part of your body. You could have a rotator cuff tear in a shoulder. You could have, a sprain in your ankle. I mean, there are so many other things, and all of those things that I just mentioned, none of them can be seen on an X-ray.
أول شيء اللي لازم نثبته بأنه نريد نسوي تحاليل، لأنه التحليل الوحيد اللي راح يطلع به تقارير وراح يبين بأنه شنو اللي متضرر به جسمك. مثل ما قلنا أول شيء الأشعة، هاي واحد. احنا طبعا مو اطباء، احنا هنا محاماه، بس ما عدا اذا انت عندك كسر، الأشعة ما تبين أي شيء آخر. الأشعة ما تبين بأنه أنت عندك تمزق بالعضلات أو بالأربطة. الأشعة ما يبين بأنه أنت عندك بالفقرات عندك فتق. ما يبين بأنه عندك أي شيء صاير
حتى الرضوض
رضوض بالأكتاف، بالركبات، بالكاحل، كل هذا ما يبين بالأشعة. بالأشعة بس الكسر يبين.
Right. So then what do? Right? Okay, so you've been at the hospital, you've gotten an x-ray, you've gone to hopefully your specialist, okay? And then you're at the specialist, and what do? You know, and I literally get asked this question all the time. And again, this is when we come in, they say, well, what do I do? You know, I had the x-ray, it was negative. So does that mean I'm not injured? I'm like, and my first question is, well, are you still in pain?
I'm in pain. And
they say, well, yeah, of course I'm in pain. I've got pain in my neck. I've been pain in my back. I've got pain down my shoulders. I say, okay, well then what you need to talk to your doctor about, and you have to talk to your doctor about it because they won't know unless you tell them. I say, what you've got to talk to your doctor about is getting these other diagnostic tests. And I listen to their complaints, and I will often tell them, ask your doctor about this test. I am not qualified to prescribe them a test. That is a doctor. But I can say to them, you know what? In my experience in these cases, I've seen this pain that you're describing me many times. And I bet you if you get this test, it is more likely than a lot of these other tests to show something. So ask your doctor if it makes sense to do that. That's almost exactly the phrasing I use.
الزبون يجي يقول أنا سويت أشعة والأشعة كل شيء ما طلع بيها، يعني معناته ما عندي قضية. لا، السؤال يجي احنا نسأل بأنه هل أنت بعدك متضرر؟ هل عندك أوجاع؟ مثل ما قلنا احنا مو أطباء، بس قارين آلاف وآلاف التقارير الطبية بحيث تبدي تعرف بأنه إذا عنده وجع بالرقبة، لو مثلا عنده تنمل وخدر بالإيد، لو عنده مثلا ما يقدر ينام زين، لو هاي أشياء المحامي من يعرف شنو الأضرار اللي أنت بيك وشنو الأشياء اللي أنت تعاني منها، نقترح بأنه ترجع لطبيبك وتقول له احتمال أنا عندي هيك وهيك، شنو إذا نقدر نسوي فلان تست، لو غير، لو هذا التست، لو هذا، لأن كل شيء له تست خاص.
Now, the two most common are X-rays and CTs. Now, CTs, or also known as CAT scan, also known as a CAT scan, So CAT scan is just an X-ray from multiple angles. So when they say we're going to do an X-ray and then we're going to do a CT, what they're really telling you in a hospital is they're going to do X-rays and then they're going to do more X-rays. Just so you know, they're the same thing. It's just different angles. So that's the first thing that's done. Beyond that, though, there are a lot of other tests. The most common one, and I think the one that almost all lawyers will start with, recommending that they talk to their doctors about, is probably an MRI. Okay, and I'm going to explain what that is.
أكثر الأحيان من تروح للمستشفى راح يقولوا لك إحنا راح نسوي الأشعة وراح نسوي لك السي تي سكان اللي هو بالضبط هي كأنما أشعة بس من غير زوايا. اللي نقترحه بأنه أكو غير تحاليل تقدر تسويها تبين أكثر أشياء أكثر.
Yeah. Now a lot of people confuse X-rays and CTs in particular with MRIs, and they're very different things. So an X-ray is using essentially it's using it's a radiological exam that is doing imaging of your bones in particular. But what it's doing is it's using radiation. Okay. An MRI does not use any radiation. An MRI is actually using magnets and radio waves. Okay. And it's producing actually in most cases more detailed images than CT scans. And it can detect all sorts of things that an X-ray can't. For example, it can detect muscle damage. It can detect brain bleeds or bruising in your brain. It can detect shoulder tears. It can detect contusions, muscle damage. I mean, there's a lot of things that an MRI can detect that an X-ray or a CT just can't do.
عندنا الأشعة هي تأخذ صورة للعظم كاملة. عندنا السي تي هي الأشعة المقطعية تأخذ قطع من الجسم وتبين كأشعة. بينما الأمراي واللي هو الرنين المغناطيسي هذا هاي تأخذ حتى العضلات الأربطة الأعصاب كله. إذا يصير اسم الله يعني عندك بالدماغ عندك ارتجاج. إذا عندك ارتجاج بالدماغ يبين. إذا عندك بليدنج نزيف بالدماغ يبين. إذا عندك قطع قطع بالشولدر بالكتف. إذا عندك فتق بالعمود الفقري هذا كله يبين. إذا عندك أي شيء بالركبات أو بالكاحل هذا كل المفاصل تبين بالأمراي اللي هو الرنين هو مغناطيسي. مع الأسف بس أكو ناس إذا عندها حديد بجسمها ممنوع تسوي الأمراي.
يعني عنده حادث سابق وصار بلاتينوم شيء
بلاتين. وإحنا هواية من الجالية كانوا بالحرب كان عندهم شظايا بجسمهم لا دائما ما يصير.
يعني إذا عنده شظية بجسمه ما يصير.
لا ما يصير.
What was the question?
Okay. So I'm saying is because a lot of the Arabic community, the war in Iraq, and they were all, in military, and sometimes they have these metal.
Yes.
In the body. So
I was going to mention that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you cannot do the MRI, unfortunately.
Right. So there are certain types of magnetic metals, right, which can be in someone's body that will prevent you from being able to do an MRI. And again, the most common thing a hospital will do instead is to say, well, okay, we'll do a CT. That may or may not be sufficient, though. But there are other tests besides MRIs that are also helpful. I just kind of talked about all of the different ways in which an MRI can show some things that an X-ray or a CT can't, but there are other tests. And I'll give you another example, something called a digital motion X-ray, also known as a video fluoroscopy. Okay. I think that's actually the more general term. I think digital motion X-ray is the, copyright term, like Kleenex or something. But what that basically does is it's a continuous stream of X-rays that almost creates a video. And I think they do something like 30 images a second. Okay, they go, and what that's able to do is detect things like ligament damage.
It will be as a video.
It's almost like, it's almost essentially like a digital X-ray video.
30 pictures in a second.
In a second.
Is a lot.
Right.
Yes.
It would be literally like, it's like a motion picture X-ray film in a way.
Okay, go ahead.
مثل ما قلنا اللي عنده شظايا، عنده مثلا طلقة أو أي شيء، واللي مكانها حرج ما يقدرون يطلعوها، أكو غير تحاليل اللي هي اسمها الأشعة المتحركة. الأشعة المتحركة أنت ودا تحرك الجزء مالتك، الأشعة تظل تاخذ صور واحدة ورا اللوح سريعة بالدقيقة، احتمال أكثر من 30 أو بالثانية قصدي أكثر من 30 صورة، فتصير كأنما فيديو يبين بالضبط شنو أكو تمزق لو لا. هواية يروحون يسوون مثلا أمراي للظهر، لازم تكون أنت نايم عدل، ما تتنفس وما تتحرك وما تسوي كل شيء وما يبين. يقول لك أنا ظهري يوجعني، بس من تروح تسوي الأشعة المتحركة مو تتحرك يبين أكو تمزق صاير بين الفقرة والأربطة المربوطة بالعضلة.
But wait, there's more. There's all sorts of other things.
يعني كفة شغلات دي يشرحها ما ممكن حتى الطبيب يشرحها.
بالضبط، لأن إحنا ما هلقد نقرأ التقارير الطبية، ما هلقد نشوفها ونعرف منو يسوي وشنو النتيجة من تطلع، شنو الفرق، لأن إحنا نشوف الفرق بين النتائج. الأطباء واحد ما يعرف الآخر، فما يعرفون شنو الفرق بين
I said, what you are explaining that all these things, the doctor can't explain them.
Well, I mean,
sometimes because if you send them to
Yeah.
a digital motion X-ray doctor,
Right.
it is different than an MRI doctor. So the MRI doctor will not know whether the digital, so they don't know what the difference is. But we see their reports.
Yes. So I don't want to say I know more than the doctor.
No.
But yes, but we have experience with all of these.
Yes.
That is true. That is very true.
I didn't say you are a doctor.
No, I know. I like to make that clear though. But I mean, there's other tests too. And this is, and I want to give a specific example of something that someone says to me, and I go, hey, I want you to ask your doctor about this test. And like, so let's say they come to me and they say, man, you know what? I have this horrible pain in my neck. And it radiates down. Okay, I'm using this terminology specifically, but they say basically the pain travels down my arms, my left and right arm, and they usually when they do this, they'll take their hand and they'll kind of pass it across their arm, okay, and then they'll pass it across their other arm, and they'll say, I've got this pain that's just traveling down my arms and into my fingertips. And do you know what that tells me? That tells me that they have something that in clinical terms is called radicular pain, okay? And when they have radiculopathy, which is what that's called, again, that's the medical term, that can be a function of nerve damage, okay? They may have a pinched nerve. You might have heard of that before, a pinched nerve somewhere in their neck or their back. And that can make pain travel down your limbs. So I say, you know what? If you're telling me that, I suggest you talk to your doctor, tell them about this radicular pain, and tell them and ask them about getting an EMG, because that can measure muscle response and electrical activity, essentially your nerve impulses down your body. And it sounds very technical, but really it's just an EMG can get you the test that'll show whether or not you got that problem.
EMM.
So there's that's the next test I'm going to talk about. So there's an EMG, which is what, and there's an EMG. I'm going to talk about that one, but this one I'm talking about is it's called an electromyography. This one. So electromyography, EMG.
الشغله اللي الزبون اللي يعاني منها مثلا يجي يقول أنا سويت الأمراي وبس أنا بعدني ظهري يوجعني ورقبتي والوجع دا ينزل على إيديه ومرات حتى أصابع تنمل ومزعجة الحالة. هاي الشغلة لازم تروح تشوف طبيب يسوي لك احنا نقولها مال اعصاب، بانه يروح يشوف نهايات الاعصاب، وهي الاي ام جي بالضبط، بانه هي تحليل بأوبر جدا ناعمة ما تحس بيها بالضبط، وكهربائية كلش قليلة صغيرة، تبين بأنه هل عندك أنت هذا العصب بخدر، لو متضرر، لو العضلة، لو أي شيء رأسا يبين. فهاي واحدة من التحاليل الأخرى.
Now you okay, well, I don't know if I'm going to get through every diagnostic test that exists now, but I'll see what I can do. No, again, we're talking about motor vehicle accidents and the testing that you can do. You just asked about an ENG as opposed to an EMG. So the EM as in Mary G, that's the one that does muscle response, electrical activity.
An ENG is what?
An ENG is an electron stimography test, and if you can't say that, great. I can't either most of the time. But it's an ENG, and that's just used to evaluate people with, say, like vertigo or hearing loss or vision loss.
Yeah.
Okay, so these type of things can be detected by an ENG. So again, if I have someone telling me about these specific symptoms, I might say to my client, go ask your doctor if an EN, as in Nancy, ENG might be helpful.
الاي ام جي قلنا للعضلات نيرفز الاعصاب. اوكي، الاي ان جي ويا النون هاي تبين بانه هل انت عندك فقد بالسمع او بالبصر او عندك اي شيء بالدماغ. هذا الاي ان جي، فهذا غير تحليل. وطبعا اكو تحاليل كوما اشكال والوان كوما، يعني هوايه.
Right. So in short, because we're running a little short on time, there's a lot of different diagnostic tests. Tell your lawyer, tell your doctor about the specific symptoms that you're having. They can get you the tests. But it's super important when you're talking to your doctor and your doctor's referring you to various places, okay? Or you're talking to them and they're getting you these different diagnostic tests. I cannot stress this enough. If people leave this show with no other information other than this, you got to tell your attorney what you do and where you do it, because we won't know unless you tell us.
اوكي، ترجمي اخر فقره وننهي البرنامج.
مختصر مفيد بانه اذا انت ما تتعالج وما تقول للطبيب مالتك او للمحامي، اهم شيء همينا للمحامي حتى نقدر
نجمع كل القضايا سوا.
لا، نخليك تروح للمكان الصحيح. الكل ضرر بجسمك. صح. تقدر تاخذ التقرير الصحيح.
صح. طبعا thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much. Always a pleasure.
وشكرا ست تمارا.
اهلا وسهلا.
مستمعينا الاعزاء، مشاهدينا الاكارم، كنا مع برنامج المحامي لورنس قاجي، كان معنا المحامي جان شرودر، وايضا الأخت العزيزة الباراليغال تمارا. فنلتقيكم إن شاء الله في الأسبوع القادم وحلقة جديدة. وهذه الحلقة كانت جدا جدا مهمة. أي واحد عنده أي سؤال، أي استفسار، يقدر يسأل أسئلة على الفيسبوك لأنه موجودة، أو على اليوتيوب. وأيضا إذا يحب يتصل بالمكتب يقدر يتصل على 248-702-6641. إلى اللقاء.